Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Time for another episode of the Mulliner and Musgrove show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and him, Sam Mulliner. Thank you very much for tuning in. Do give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe to the channel, get into the comments as well. If you're listening on the audio only platform, thank you as always. Do leave us a rating and review. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to the shows over the last few weeks. I know the majority of you guys have enjoyed it. We always love seeing the feedback. Sam, welcome back to the show. How are you keeping you well?
Yeah, good. I know you were admiring my very fashionable Ben Sherman polo shirt. Is it cold in the northeast today? You're wearing a jumper.
Do you know what? My wife said this. She said, "Why are you putting your winter jumper on?" But it's actually, I mean, it looks thick and it is reasonably thick, but it's not. I'm not sweating in it. It's quite a nice little number. Shows my age, both from Cotton Traders.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't
Nice.
show your age. It shows that you're probably mentally twice the age you actually are. But yeah, I wouldn't be wearing such knitwear at the end of June.
Hey, I'm at a good temperature. I'm not too cold, not too warm, just right.
That's because you're in an air-conditioned studio.
That is very, very true. How we doing?
Good. Yeah, I've followed up from last week, and I've read up on the links that you said of my goalkeeper targets, and I saw that Manchester United were readying a bid for to put into Atalanta for Carsonetti, which is probably going to be swiftly rejected. But yeah, that would be a shame. And Truman did well against Bayern Munich in the Club World Cup the other night. So yeah, good to see. But it looks as though Trafford could well be on his way if he isn't already.
Yeah, by the time you guys watch this or listen to this episode, there's a good chance that James Trafford may have well have become a Newcastle United player, which won't have pleased Sam too much, I don't think. I think you said you like him, you're enthused,
Yeah.
but he wouldn't be your number one choice.
No, but that doesn't mean it's not a good choice. Yeah, I no issues with Trafford whatsoever. I hope he does really well if he is a Newcastle United player.
Well, the last few weeks we focused on alternatives to their main targets, players they can bring in instead of those that we believe are top of their shopping list. This week we're going to do something different, and we're going to look at how Newcastle United potentially raise extra funds this summer, i.e., players that they could sell. And it's fair to say, before even reading off any names, before even discussing any names, they haven't got too many sellable assets, have they? Sam,
Uh,
that you'd
well, we
want to
have.
sell,
Yeah,
that you'd
yeah,
want to
we've got
sell.
loads. If you sell Isak for 150, 200 million, then yeah, there's your PSR done. And the floodgates are open for some serious spending. And yet we may still come out of it weaker because Isak is that good. But yeah, in terms of the ones we want to move on, no, we haven't, because our squad depth is still not where it should be because of these stupid rules. We all know, and we all have our feelings about PSR and just how idiotic it is, brought in to stop teams like ourselves and Aston Villa, who have got their own big struggles this summer. We know it's not fit for purpose, but this is the world we now live in, and unfortunately, it's hindering our progress, and it like it did last summer with having to sell Minter and Anderson in hurried fashion towards the end of June. And yeah, whilst we're not in such grave circumstances this time around, we still need to think about, you know, incomings in terms of the monetary side of things.
Yeah, I mean, because if Newcastle United go out and sign, say, three top players this summer, reports have said they've put in three, one for Langer, one for Trafford, and one for João Pedro. This is at the time of recording, which on the table are around 120, 125 million pounds. Doesn't leave you much room to strengthen elsewhere in that squad. And that's where selling players becomes so vital. And you look around the Premier League, and there's some great examples of teams who just sell players to raise funds. I mean, we can talk about Liverpool selling Leverkusen or Nunes potentially to some Serie A side, and that all
How?
helps Liverpool rebuild. And I think before we get into some names that Newcastle United could sell, we have to look at why they're in this position. And isn't necessarily something that the current ownership have done. I think it's something that they're actually paying for because of the previous ownership, and really just not strengthening the squad and the youth ranks with players who had that longevity so that they could move them on when needed at a profit.
Yeah, and whilst you just briefly mentioned the previous ownership, I think the big kind of obvious starting point away from selling players is what Chelsea have done and what Villa are looking into, and it's easy to just say, well, sell the women's team back to yourself, in essence. We can't do that because of years of neglect from Mike Ashley. Becky Langley, as we know, has done a tremendous job, but we're not in the WSL. Chelsea are obviously one of the best teams around in the women's game. Villa are a good team. They're a solid WSL side. They're not spectacular, but they're a good solid mid-table WSL side. So they have a value. We're at the moment mid-table championship. That's not a criticism. They've done brilliantly, amazing, but we don't have that value to sell it back to ourselves without raising eyebrows. And everything Newcastle United do is put under the microscope. So that's a kind of no go as things stand. I mean, give it a year or two, and that could be an option. But yeah, we're paying for years of neglect from the previous owner because he left the women's team to be run by the charity, the foundation, which did a great job in just letting that women's team survive. But we're obviously plying our trade in the fourth tier.
Yeah, and it does seem like the current ownership are paying the price for neglect right across the board from Mike Ashley, because other than exploiting these PSR loopholes, which you imagine if Newcastle United did do, then all of a sudden the Premier League would maybe sit up and take notice. I genuinely do think as well of long-term planning under Mike Ashley has led us to this point where they have no assets that you'd happily sell and no assets that you'd happily sell at a profit. Now, of course, the current ownership have been in a wee while now, so some people will say, well, actually, they've had the opportunity to spend on players that they could move on at a later date. But of course, the situation they came in needed to spend relatively big to make sure Newcastle didn't hurtle down to the Championship. And then they obviously paid for that last summer with the whole selling of Minter and Arneson. So again, I think you can bring that back to Mike Ashley's days in charge and the damage and the pieces that the current ownership had to pick up. We'll start with some names, Sam, that I'll throw to you, and we'll talk about potential prices that they could get. Start with your favourite man, Mr. Matt Targett, 29 years of age, out of contract next summer, initially on loan. Then they spent around £15 million turning that deal into a permanent one. You were so against it. He's only made 47 appearances for Newcastle United. They're not going to get anything really from. You're probably looking at 2-3 million at most.
Yeah. To which, I mean, you've got to balance it as well as how much is it going to cost to replace these players, because you still need a squad going into a European season as well. So is it worth getting rid of him? Probably not. He's fine as a backup left back to playing kind of lesser Premier League games at home, perhaps, or League Cup early rounds, FA Cup early rounds, like he did last season, if he even stays fit, of course. So is there real value in selling him on? Probably not. Yeah, it was just one of them where he did tremendously well on loan, but the resources were probably better spent elsewhere for a left back, like they were a year later with Lewis Hall. Yeah, like you say, he's not a bad player. Like I say, he did very well that initial 6 month loan. He was fantastic. But yeah, I think it was a mistake. And there was never really there's never really going to be any resale value to him. So is it worth it? I don't know. You tell me. Is it worth moving him on when we're going to need? Obviously, you might say it is worth moving on. Now we've seen Livramento play left back as well, who's been excelling. but then that kind of leaves gaps on the other flank with Trippier and Kraft, and I don't know. You could also employ Dan Burn back there at left back. So I don't know. Could you maybe eke 5 million from a Leeds United or somewhere like that? I don't know.
It is all about cover, isn't it? And like you mentioned, you could have Tino behind Hall, could move Dan Burn over on the right hand side. I think it depends on what happens with Kieran Trippier. I haven't got him down on my list to leave this summer because I think he performed so well once Tino went over to left back, and obviously Lewis Hall was injured, and he came in and he really seemed to find a second wind at Newcastle United. He's been absolutely superb for me. He's won me
Yeah.
over. So unless it's a daft bid from, it would have to you'd think a Saudi side, I'd keep Kieran Trippier, which might in turn open the door for Matt Targett to leave, because I think you do have enough cover. You got your Howe as well, maybe who could come in if needed in the cup games. A highly
Yeah.
rated right back has just signed a new deal, so I think they've got numbers. It's just whether they've got the quality in backup with injuries and suspensions. It was looking as good as Trippier and Livermore did last season. Trippier, if he forced to an injury, are you then playing Kraft? He ended up playing Jacob Murphy there at
Well,
right
can
back
you
for a
do?
few games.
Can Trippier do 3-game weeks consistently? I mean,
That's the question.
you mentioned trips there and winning you over. He didn't need to be winning anyone over. He's, I mean, he hadn't lost that right in my opinion. He's been a phenomenal signing. So
Well,
I think,
don't get me wrong. It was absolutely superb signing, and we owe him so much. He was the one that
yeah.
kickstarted all this. But if I had if I was the man making the decisions, I would have accepted that Bayern Munich bid when it came in and made a bit of money. Now,
Well,
obviously, in
thank
hindsight,
goodness
you
you're
think,
not.
well, yeah, you see, in hindsight, I mean, his performance in the Carabao Cup final, for example, was unbelievable. But people who watch this podcast and listen to it know that I've long advocated for Trippier to go, to get the wages, get any sort of money you can. But I have to hold my hands up and say the way he finished the season, or that period when he first came in and essentially replaced Lewis Hall, with going over to that side, he's done enough for me to say, actually let's keep him for another year, user experience. Hopefully Hall comes back, battle against Tino for right back, and then you'd probably be second choice, but it's an excellent seven.
Yeah, but when you signed Trippier when he was that age in the first place, you wouldn't be thinking resale value.
No, but if someone, I mean, if what was the bid from Bayern Munich? It was reported to be 12 to 15 million pounds. In the world of PSR, you've got to make difficult decisions, and
Was it
some
that
might still
much?
say, yeah, it was at least
Mm.
10, wasn't it? And some people might say, well, actually, was it the right decision to hold on to him? I think probably. Like I say, given the performances that he did put in last season, but yeah, with Matt Targett, I think it depends on what happens with Trippier on the other flank, and it is all about cover and that question about building the squad with so many games coming next season.
And they'll need
Sadly,
replacing. So,
exactly.
all right, let's go with that. That Trippier we could have got rid for 12, 15 mil. Okay, so who are you going to replace him with, and how much is that going to cost? And is he going to be as good as Trippier, or better than Trippier? Because you want him to be better, don't you? That's how you go about improving your squad, for crying out loud. So that's what you got to think about. So yeah, with Target, obviously we're losing Jamal Lewis as well in that position, which is just I thought that was such a good signing. I will never understand that whatsoever. I hope he gets a good move and can play consistently, Lewis. But Target, yeah, you're going to be getting peanuts for him. I know these values are getting so inflated this summer so far, but these are for players of a decent age. I mean, Kwanzaa isn't worth half of what Leverkusen paid for him, but there you go. He's young. Target isn't. And a few of the other players we're going to be discussing aren't of prime age either. So
Yeah, I mean, just on that Trippier point that I made at the time, I'd made that prediction that Livramento was going to be ahead of Trippier in the pecking order. So that explains why I was a little bit more comfortable with letting Trippier go, because big wages, and do you want him sitting on the bench unhappy? But look, like I say, he's won me over, and it's going to be interesting to see that battle for right back next season. Sticking with the fullback position, Harrison Ashby, 23, last on loan at QPR last season, 31 appearances. Again, you'll be looking at best a couple of £1 million for him.
Well, yeah. What did we pay? 3?
Yeah,
Something like that.
Paraded on
Yeah,
the pitch alongside Anthony Gordon.
he was. Yes, I was there that night. Yeah, I never really understood that signing, to be honest. I get it's kind of low risk because of the low fee, but I don't think he was that highly touted. He's done okay in the Championship, and that's probably his level, to be honest. But you might be lucky to recoup the 3 million we paid for him. I'm not so sure we will, though. How many years has he got left on his contract? Not that many, I would guess.
No,
Is
I
it up
don't
at
think
the
he's
end of the
got many.
season?
I couldn't actually. It wasn't listed on transfer market where the rest of them were. So, but I'm assuming it's not up at the end of this. This summer. I would imagine it's probably next summer. As is Isaac Hayden's deal.
I was so pleased when he signed that deal as well. I was chuffed. Yeah, again, it's one of those where he's obviously got no part to play in our squad. I mean, he's a fantastic player, Isaac Hayden, and yeah, he needs a proper move, doesn't he? Whether it's the Championship, I still think he can do a job in the Premier League, no problem. But yeah, not to the levels we're now aiming for and are currently at. Let's face it. Yeah, great player, great servant, but I'm surprised more teams haven't been queuing up for him. I really are. I thought we'd be able to move him along relatively quickly, but it hasn't been the case. He'll probably have another loan move to the Championship until his contract then does expire.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think you would get too much money from with a year left on his deal. And there, look, we've mentioned there 3 players of who we could see Newcastle potentially moving on this summer, and we haven't even reached a £10 million total
No,
with the rest
and
of
this
fees. Probably even
is
haven't reached 5 million.
yeah, no, probably not. But this is why I mean we spoke briefly before starting this off air, and I think there are other avenues to maybe question and highlight, and maybe some areas where we can be smarter. We spoke before about ownership and the new ownership. There probably still questions to be asked about things like training ground sponsor, training kit sponsor, and all these other revenue streams that have not yet been explored. That we thought was going to be the case. So what's going on with that? We don't know. And I think that a big area is we have to be smarter in the free transfer market as well, like we were with Lloyd Kelly. A few deals like that would be phenomenal for PSR. And on one example I would use would be Angel Gomez, who's been allowed to just go under the radar. England international, let's not forget, in an area where we're pretty strong. So we could then, if we were to sign an Angel Gomez on a free transfer, we could then maybe ship out a Willick or a Longstaff or whatever. Or, Gomez has a resale value, but no, he's gone on a free to Marseille, which seems a catastrophic waste of time, really. Again, Jonathan David is a player who we've spoken about over the past few weeks. Free transfer, yes, it's going to cost a pretty penny on signing on fees, agent fees, and all these other silly fees that go around with contract talks. But worst case scenario, it adds world class squad depth. Best case scenario for PSR, you could sell an attacker and the squad is still strong and you've got headroom finance wise. So I think that's where we need to be smarter, because the Lloyd Kelly deal, who did all right for us, but he was never getting in the first team regularly, was he? And we've sold him for 20 million. Great deal.
Shall we move on to then other names of players who we could potentially see leave this summer, Sam? I think we'll start with Sean Longstaff because he was probably the number one pick of most Newcastle United fans to leave this summer. Fantastic servant for the club, living the Geordie dream, but it's fair to say that his days as a first-team player at Newcastle United are over. He can barely get off the bench, let alone into that first team starting at 11. His contract is up next summer. 27 years of age. He's been linked to Everton, been linked to Leeds. 10 to 12 million pounds is the reported price tag or asking fee, which I don't think is too overly ambitious. However, I think he now might stay simply because of these homegrown Champions League rules, which states that you've got to have 4 club-trained players in your squad who've done so between the ages of 15 and 21, and he would fit that bill.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't new rules. They've been around for 2 decades. The club have got a decision to make with Sean. They either sell him this summer, or they offer him a new contract, which sees him see out his peak years at the club up until he's like 32, 33. It's an interesting dilemma. I don't mind him as a squad player. The argument of pure profit, which is my new least favourite footballing phrase, for PSR is an intriguing one. But again, you're looking 12, 15 million pounds. The days of 50 million pounds are long gone. Yeah, it's an interesting quandary because I don't know. Can he come in and do a job? Maybe. Is he going to do the job of a Bruno or Tonali? No, of course not. But I still like him. I still think he's a good Premier League player. Just sort of no frills, but you do need that in a squad. And are there other sort of academy prospects coming through that can fill those places that we need for Champions League? I'm not so sure, other than signing more goalkeepers, which is just silly. I'd have Tim Krul back, and he would fulfil one of those homegrown quotas, because we snapped him up at a very, very early age. And Fraser Forster is another one who'd also be eligible. I prefer Krul, to be honest. But yeah, those quotas need filling. Otherwise, your squad is thinner than what it should be. So Miley, who you probably wouldn't normally have to register, would have to be registered. Maybe a Leo Shahar, who we've already mentioned as well, and Sean Longstaff will get a suitable offer. I suppose the club would be open to offers. Whether any suitable ones arrive or not remain to be seen. But I kind of don't mind what happens with Sean Longstaff to an extent. I'd be happy enough if he stayed, but if we sold him for a good fee, so be it. He can go and play first team football, and I'm sure he'd do very well.
It would be pure profit, wouldn't it, if they managed to get anything for him? And I guess, as you've kind of referenced there, it might come down to what he wants. Is he happy to sit on the bench and play limited minutes here or there, even though it
But
could
he'd
be in
play.
the Champions League?
He'd play games again. This is we're going into a very interesting season because James Bunt is going to really earn his keep this season and have to have difficult conversations with Eddie Howe, who, aside from the Paul Mitchell soap opera, we know Howe and Bunt have a very, very good working relationship. How very complimentary, and it's very interesting that Bunt is staying, whereas his pal that brought him in, Mitchell's right hand man, was Bunt, is gone essentially. But 3 game weeks now. The way we play is very high intensity, very, very draining on fitness levels. 3 game weeks, Champions League, Premier League, Champions League, Premier League, League Cup, whatever, because you want to put a good title defence in, don't you? Let's face it. So the squad is going to have to be utilised. So Longstaff and Miley will probably have more minutes this coming season than they would have done last season.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think there's a chance that Longstaff will be kind of bottom of that list, and I also think there's a small chance that he might actually push to leave. If he can get guaranteed first team football at an Everton or Leeds at his stage in his career, he's already played and scored in the Champions League for Newcastle United. He's been part of a squad that won the cup. Then he might
Nearly
push to do
choked,
that
nearly died, didn't he? Nearly choked on
on the
ticker tape
confetti. Yeah.
during the trophy lift. That's very funny.
So I guess it all comes down to what he wants as well. And that leads us on to the next name on the list, which is Joe Willick, because he's the
Yeah.
one who you can get the most money for. He's got 2 years left on his deal, 25 years of age. So he's a really good age for someone to come in and snap up and hopefully get the best out of. We've seen it in glimpses, but we haven't seen it consistently enough. He's suffered from injuries. There's no doubt in his effort and his commitment and his attitude and the ability that he's got, Sam. But I just look at the list of potential sales this summer, bearing in mind the Champions League quota rules. I just think that leads you to Joe Willick being the most likely to go, because he'll get you a decent enough price as well. Will they recuperate the money they spent on him, signing him from Arsenal all those years ago? Probably not, but I don't think it'll be too much beneath that, because he is, like I say, still at a decent age for the right manager and the right team to really see his career hopefully excel.
Yeah, disappointing season for Willock. Very, very frustrating. He's looked okay in glimpses, but he's had his fair share of stinkers as well, proper stinkers as well. So yeah, if you can get a good fee for him. However, were you to sell a Longstaff, I'd argue we wouldn't need to bring in midfield reinforcements. If we were to sell Willock, I would argue you do, because Willock offers a more attacking threat than Longstaff. High energy, high intensity, can dovetail in between the left and can kind of is adaptable, can do a job out wide. So I think he would need replacing, which is where my point comes in about utilising free transfer markets. Because if you were to sell Willock, how much of that then gets reinvested? How much would it cost to replace him for someone who is better than Joe Willock? That's what you've got to think about. So yes, the sale is there, and obviously that all counts as one lump fee for your year's PSR, whereas a transfer is amortized over the length of 4 or 5 years, depending on contract length and whatnot. So it's a tricky one, but yeah, I could understand perfectly clear about a Joe Willock sale this summer. I wouldn't be against it on that proviso, though, that we probably would need to add another midfielder in.
But could you turn to the youth ranks potentially? Alfie Harrison, Sanusi, for example, who's also just signed a new deal. In that position, in terms of midfield and on the wings, there's some really exciting youngsters about. And I'm not saying you bring them into the squad and you play them in the Champions League, but Joe Willock, I know he played a lot of games last season. He played 41 times, but you're not necessarily going to be replacing him if he goes with someone who I think comes in and ousts Joe Linton or even Lewis Miley to a degree. I think a lot of people were shocked at just how much more game time he got over Lewis. So maybe you could sell him, bring the funds in, and then place your faith into one of these youngsters to come up to be upgraded to the first team squad and do a job when called upon.
Yeah, potentially. Sanusi out wide, who looked bright, but injury obviously disrupted his progress. Alfie Harrison, it's a big year for him because it's kind of Ethel bus time. But apparently he was impressing Howe and maybe involved in the pre-season set up with the first team. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares. And this is another avenue I wanted to talk about anyway, because whilst we've seen our youth recruitment step up since the takeover with Minter, who've obviously sold on, and Cordero has been the only signing so far, who looks another bright prospect will head straight out on loan, and Harrison himself, Koal, Cathal Heffernan as well. We need to do more more and more and more and more, because the bigger teams out there, this is how they do it. Likes of Manchester City sell their youth players. Chelsea have done it for over a decade. So like we've done with Minter, yes, it's disappointing to see these young players with brilliant potential leave, but City have done it with Palmer, Chelsea have done it with countless players. To think Chelsea had De Bruyne, Salah on their books back in the day is kind of crazy to fathom now. But Chelsea are relentless. I mean, when doing some research around these prospects that I've highlighted to you over the past few weeks, there's been a few from South America who I haven't been able to include it, because when you do a bit of research and a bit of digging, they've already got a pre-contract agreement with Chelsea. It's relentless, their scouting network, worldwide. So that's something we really need to step up and be able to sell these players on if they're not quite what we're after. I think that's crucial going forward. Crucial. So whether Alfie Harrison is good enough to step up or whether he gets sold on, it remains to be seen. Gran Kowal is another one where there's still sort of question marks. He didn't get the best of loan deals when he first signed. Minter obviously did. Hopefully Cordero does as well. Obviously Elliot Anderson was a bitter pill to swallow. Could you go and get him back if we sell Willick? Probably not. But look, this is a key area of focus that the club need to invest a lot of time and money in, because it could prove to be priceless going forwards in terms of revenue and getting a better production line, which we've not had for a while. Yes, we have the odd one or two come through that we can sell on. Andy Carroll, of course, back in the day, but it's not consistent.
I guess there's a few things to pick up on there. I mean, first off, having a good first team squad filled with quality is really important when it comes to then selling those players who can't break into the first team squad. So like the likes of your Cole Palmer, for example, who Pep just for whatever reason didn't think was the right player, even though such a talented player, but City had such a depth already in that squad, or such a starting 11, that he wanted to go first team football, and Pep was happy to have that. And I think you need to see your first team squad being built as well as talented players being brought into the youth setup, and it goes hand in hand, because if you've got that talent in the first team, then you do end up selling talented players from the youth ranks who can't break in. But you need, I think, both of those things to be working together. And also in terms of that scouting setup that you're talking about, again, we go back to what we talked about very, very early on in the show, is that they're kind of starting from scratch in many ways. And I think we have to applaud them for what they've done. They are stepping up this recruitment. I mean, getting Alfie Harrison, for example, was a massive coup, and we've started to see them add some real talent in. But again, they are starting from next to nothing because of how neglected it was prior to their ownership.
Well, Cordero could well prove to be a bit of a coup as well with the teams he was linked with. He'll be, I imagine, this loan move that will step up now. Spain are out of the under-19s tournament that's ongoing, but yeah, again, it just needs stepping up and stepping up and stepping up, because we are so far behind. But yeah, this is how, one of the reasons that Chelsea have the most PSR headroom, which is just diabolical in every sense of the word when it comes to these loopholes and rules and selling infrastructure. But yeah, this is a huge one going forward. And look, our first team recruitment on the whole has been very good. And if you were selling on Bruno, Tonali, Isak, you're looking at £100 million plus for all of these players. So that's what it's going to take. That's why we have the kind of transfer strategy we have with buying these players at the sort of right age to then go on and either prosper for us or sell on for a ridiculously hefty profit to kind of satisfy PSR for years to come.
Yeah, a long-term plan, no doubt in place, and they are working towards that Nick Pope is the next man I've got on my list here. I don't think he'll be sold, by the way. I think Eddie Howe will do his utmost to keep Nick Pope at Newcastle United, even if James Trafford does indeed sign. 33 years of age, contract until next summer. Leeds have been linked, brought in for £10 million from a relegated Burnley side. £10 million is the price tag that has been suggested by some. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, his exit probably goes down to what does he want from the last few years of his career? Is he happy to battle with James Trafford? I know we said in last week's episode, Sam, that if Trafford comes in, he's not necessarily, in your opinion, number one. There'll be a bit of a battle there.
Yeah.
But of course, not Nick Pope wouldn't be guaranteed that number one spot. You say if he moves to the likes of Leeds, he's pretty much nailed on to be starting every week. So I think it comes down to what he wants, really. But I don't think Eddie Howe, if he had the final say, would cash in.
No, but I mean, a couple of three of these goalkeepers need to leave, and I think definitely either should Trafford be brought in, which we're kind of expecting to happen, either Pope or Dubravka need to go because it makes no sense otherwise. We'll have a conversation shortly about Vlachodimos, I imagine, because that situation is slightly more complex. But there's no need to have three keepers in a battle for one spot when you've got kind of two guys there that are not along for the ride. That's a bit harsh, but in John Ruddy and Mark Gillespie that are there to kind of be sort of more utilised in the coaching status, really. And we see him warming up the keepers along with Shwan Jalal and Adam Bartlett on match day. But then they're never going to have any sort of first team role. So to have three that could potentially are is a waste of resources, really. If you could cash in, you're not going to get anything for Dubravka because of his age. Pope, you could get a few quid. So it kind of makes sense. You can't really rely on Nick Pope to be fit for an entire season anymore. Don't get me wrong. I think he's been fantastic. I think it was the right call. And I said it at the time when people were clamouring for Dubravka. I think I said it to you on here that we should have let Dubravka go to Saudi. And Pope is the number one. It proved to be a good call in the end. Pope did well in the cup final. So one of them needs to go. You're not going to get much money for them, but we don't need, especially as we talked about before, the homegrown. If you're going to bring in a Krull or a Fraser Force to sit on the bench in a Champions League game, then we could end up having 8 or 9 goalkeepers, which is just silly.
It sounds like you're not too against the idea of cashing in on Pope if the right deal comes along.
Would only because if Pope does go, then Dubravka's fine as second choice, and Trafford could then, or whoever it may be, can then go on and try and cement the first team spot on his own. It's a risk if Trafford isn't what they hope to be, but then again, every transfer is a risk. So I love Pope. We were sort of talking about it last week, weren't we? When he was signed, is he that much better than Dubravka? Then you realise he is. And the only source of frustration when it comes to Nick Pope is his distribution off the floor. So other than that, you take that out of it, then he's been absolutely phenomenal for us. He's a tremendous goalkeeper. But just kick the ball better.
We will now talk about Vlachodimos then. The man that Newcastle signed from Nottingham Forest last summer as Elliot Anderson went the other way.
Hate this.
No concrete word on how much they paid for him, but it's suspected to be quite a lot. Now, a lot of people have said, cash in on Vlachodimos to get him off the books.
You can't.
But I don't think it's occurred to everybody that actually, and I'll hold my hands up, it didn't occur to me until last week. And I'm being honest on that, so you can say what you want about me, but at least I'm being honest about it. It didn't occur to me that actually they can't sell him this summer because it would be at a significant loss, which would hit the PSR accounts.
Well, not just this summer, the next 2 summers. So, yeah. So you could the reported fee was about 15-20, wasn't it? Which is sickening. Which means net Forest got Elliot Anderson for about 10-15 million, which again makes me physically sick. But yeah, then you amortize that over 4 or 5 years, and if you sell him for 5 million, you then kind of are still having to pay off that deal for a player that's no longer with us, and yet it's still costing you money and affecting your transfer. So getting a loan fee and kind of bringing him back every year and loaning him out is the most sensible option, really, if you're not going to play him, which it's abundantly clear Howe has no interest in even putting him in a match day squad these days. Even when, you know, the squad is threadbare, we see John Ruddy on the bench over Vlachodimos. So I just, yeah, the whole side of that deal just completely stinks. So yeah, you're gonna have to loan him out, and I don't know. Hope Panathinaikos need a goalkeeper, or PAOK, or whatever. AEK Athens need a keeper.
But is anyone really paying £2 to £3 million in a loan fee for Vlachodimos? I highly doubt it.
No, no, you're stuck.
Hmm.
It's not. It was an awful deal, but we were desperate. We knew this at the time.
Yeah.
So this is what happens. So again, this is why I'm surprised more teams haven't sort of put in cheeky bids for like Morgan Rogers from Villa or something like that. Arsenal were interested in Ollie Watkins. Why aren't they trying to undercut them? Why are teams not taking advantage of Aston Villa, who need to sell? I think they're about 30-35 million shy. So yeah, why they're not getting the same treatment, I don't quite know. But yeah, we were desperate. We were obviously in a bigger hole because having to sell Minter and settling with Man United for Ashworth and then doing that deal as well for Anderson and Vlachodimos. Yeah, it just stinks the place out. So we're stuck with him long term, unless a Saudi team want to come in and take him off our hands for 20 odd mil, which again would raise alarm bells with the powers that be, because heaven forbid we make a profit on a player. So yeah, we're stuck with him.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. But hopefully, just for the lad's sake, he can go out and get some first team football somewhere, and Newcastle can pick up some sort of loan fee, even if it's just £500,000. It all counts, I guess. You mentioned there, why is no one taking advantage of Aston Villa, because they were the team that everyone had tipped to be in PSR struggles. Now, at the time of recording this episode, which is the 27th of June, this episode won't go out until the 1st of July. So by then, James Trafford may have signed. By then, João
By
Pedro may
then,
all
you
be a
know,
Newcastle United player.
welcome to Newcastle United, Morgan Rogers.
Yeah, and by then we may have seen some teams target
Rather
Aston
him than a
Villa.
Langer.
Your hate for Alanga knows no bounds, but we'll not get into that. It leads us on to the kind of the final point of the show, really, and it's whether Newcastle United need to sanction the sale of a big star, of one of those assets that we don't want to sell, but for the long-term benefit of the club, do they need to sanction a sale? Now, we all know we don't want to sell Isaac, we don't want to sell Bruno, we don't want to sell Tonali. A lot of people, however, seem open to the idea of selling Anthony Gordon. So, if Liverpool or any other side, Sam, come in and put £80 million on the table for Anthony Gordon, are you cashing in?
No, I'm not. This one surprised me that people would be open to selling Gordon. Harvey Barnes is another name that's been linked with to being sold as well, just because it's the one area of the pitch where we've actually got strength in depth, and none of them really want to do a job on the right hand side. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you get emotionally attached to these world class players that we're not really used to properly yet. We were probably open to selling Bruno, hence why the £100 million release clause, which, I mean, I thought was a bargain, but no team wanted to take advantage, thankfully. Man City were the ones that were linked, but then again, when you see they got Reinders for what is an absolute bargain, by the way, you could probably see why. And I don't think that's an issue for this summer. I think next summer there'll be issues, because we're now at a stage where we now have to qualify for Champions League every year to keep hold of these players. So Isak is. I'm fully. I'm 100% confident Isak's going nowhere this summer. Next summer terrifies me, because if we don't finish top four, we're in trouble, because Europa League, Europa Conference League is probably not enough to keep those players when you see the fantastic underdog story at Liverpool, where they can just, scrape together the pittance of 116 million for Florian Wirtz to go with their world's most expensive goalkeeper, their £80 million centre half, their £100 million striker that can't score and can't get off the bench for them. What an underdog story. Yeah, but it's us that have spoiled world football. But they could come and knock in. I think Barcelona will be after a striker when Lewandowski eventually retires. That worries me. Do Real Madrid need another midfielder? In 12 months' time or so, potentially. And if they come knocking, you've got no choice, as Liverpool have found out this year with Alexander-Arnold. And guess what? They're going to find it out next year as well with Canate. So, yeah, it's a huge season. In fact, I think we're at not necessarily a crossroads, but this is why I have such strong feelings about signings of Elanga, of Pedro, and whatever. That whilst we have this money to spend, we need to be ambitious in our signings, because of how crucial this summer is. We need to be going on and getting that Champions League place consistently. Otherwise, we're going to lose these players, which, yes, we can then reinvest, but how much is it going to cost to replace Alexander Isak? I mean, and can one person do that?
No, I get that point, but the point about Newcastle not being ambitious enough in their transfer targets, again, I mean, we had this discussion last week, and I don't understand where you are coming
I don't
from,
understand your loving for Elanga.
because I think he's a very, very talented player, and I think he'll be worth
He's
at
a
least
good
double
player.
what Newcastle United play from. I don't think you're being realistic in terms of.
I am being realistic. I'm not saying, right, let's go and get Rodrigo from Real Madrid. He might be available. I'm not saying F it. Let's go and, we should have gone and got Svartskelia before PSG did. I'm not saying, oh, let's bring Harry Kane back from Bayern Munich. I am being realistic. All the players I highlighted in the past few weeks have followed the mould of our transfer policy, have been decent value, and have, in my opinion, obviously, are better than the players that have been highlighted in the press.
Well,
Have
we'd love to
higher
get into
ceilings
it
anyway. And
again.
again, the Elanga, Pedro, good players. I'm not disputing that. I'm not arguing that whatsoever. But can they go on to achieve and have similar ceilings to that of Bruno, Tonali, Botman, Isak? I don't think so.
Well, Newcastle United clearly do, and I suppose that's the important opinion that counts. And for what it's worth, I do think Elanga will go on to be an absolute star, whether it's for
And for
Newcastle United
balance, for
or
what it's
Chelsea.
worth, I thought Jamal Lewis was a tremendous signing.
Again, so you do get some things wrong then.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just before I read out some comments from our viewers and listeners, just a reminder this episode is sponsored by Saily, a new eSIM service app brought to you by the creators of NORD VPN. Here you can choose from several affordable eSIM data plans in over 200 destinations. With a Saily eSIM, you'll always have a connection when needed. If you've ever been lost abroad or badly needed an internet connection with no Wi-Fi spot on site, you'll understand what a difference a local SIM card can make. An eSIM provides an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. Download the app once, away you go. Affordable. You can pick from global and regional plans, avoid scammers, protect your privacy, and there's 24/7 support available as well. Click the link in the podcast description box for a discounted offer. Also, there's a link in there to get your hands on a copy of the Cup Winners' Cup magazine celebrating Newcastle's Carabao Cup final success. Yes, Sam, yours is in the post. Don't worry about that before you get on to me.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
Just Andrew, if I may, just an extra point as well, just on kind of my opinions and thoughts. Because don't get me wrong, if we sign Alanga, if we sign Pedro, they have my full support. I wouldn't have signed Harvey Barnes, and I said this on NFTV back in the day. I didn't understand why we signed Harvey Barnes. I love Harvey Barnes since it's in a black and white shirt. I thought he was phenomenal. His numbers speak for themselves. He's great, brilliant. Some of the goals I mean, when we were hobbling through games and kind of battling and not playing well, but picking up 3 points, he was a huge part of that. Harvey Barnes, Wolves, um, Spurs at home. So look, if we sign them, we sign them. They get my full support. I just think we can potentially do better, potential wise.
I just think you're paying a bit of a premium for these Premier League experienced players to ensure they hit the ground running. And not everyone agrees with that. And a lot of people have said over the past week, well, we're there, Botman, Isaac,
It's
excuse
not
me,
an exact.
Bruno
It's not an
didn't
exact
have
science.
experience. It's not, but I think that's where that premium comes in. At the end of the day, they are quality players with, I think, huge potential and more levels to go. And the most important point for me is if Eddie Howe has as much control as we believe he does, and these are the players that he wants, he's the man who's managing them. He's the man who's putting them into the formation he's choosing. The buck stops with him at the end of the day. And I think the best way to get Newcastle United to the next level, the best way to get Eddie Howe to the next level is to give the man what he wants. And if he wants these Premier League experienced players, yes, Newcastle United have to then pay the money that the teams are asking for. But us as a fan base, everyone can have their own opinions, and the more than entitled to share them. We disagree. People in the comments will disagree with us and have, their feelings on paying 60 million for Alanga. But if that's who Eddie Howe wants, he has done enough to earn that trust and that right to be trusted with his demands. And I back him 100%. If he gets Alanga, if he gets Pedro, like I'm not on board with the Pedro sign 100%, but I trust Eddie Howe to turn him into the star that he thinks he can be.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you just said. Really, he has earned the right. He will get a statue outside St James's. He is the man that ended the trophy hoodoo and did it with a depleting squad. So absolutely, I don't disagree with that. But and to kind of go against my argument, you kind of, I think he's searching for a type of player like he'd want to emulate, maybe like Sadio Mane, who was obviously at Southampton, did well enough, and then Liverpool spent a lot of money on him. Could he go on to then find an extra level? He did, convincingly so. So can Pedro do the same? We will all hope so. Should they become Newcastle United players? So time will tell.
But that is the other point. There would be some Newcastle United fans who would kick up a right fuss if Newcastle went and signed XYZ from a mid-table or heaven forbid a side that's just been relegated from the Premier League, because that's not where we're aiming for. We've got to be aiming bigger and higher than this. Yet we've seen Liverpool do that. Jota, Van Dijk, Mane. I know they'd all had great seasons, but they were still at clubs who were well below the level of the club they were joining. And sometimes, especially on this podcast, people know I've got my list of certain players. Strand Larson, I think, would be fantastic for Newcastle. And often the response is, "Oh, you can't be targeting him. Like, what? He's a mid-table striker." It's like, we're there, but we do see big teams. City have done it. Chelsea, the top teams do look to pick up players from inferior sides because because they're at the top of the level. Liverpool. There's no one better than Liverpool. Do you know what I mean?
Tell you what else they do. They utilise free transfer markets for experienced players as well.
They do.
Remember that the first season that Man City won the Premier League, they had Frank Lampard, they had Patrick Vieira. Players that have obviously passed their peak, but that experience, that know-how, and when you're surrounding them with good youngish players, can really help see them over the line, which they sort of did, which again is something I think we need to do on top of getting these really players at a good age.
I mean, we're going a little bit off a tangent, but I mean that's why I would have signed James Milner when he left Liverpool. I know his time at Brighton hasn't quite gone to plan, but I think for the experience and what he could still give, I think he would have been superb in some sort of role. It's like Doucouré from Everton. Is he going to go and win you a cup? No, but what he does do is bring you experience. He's on a free transfer, and he can still do a job even at his age. And but he's left Liverpool. He's left Everton. There's a reason he's leaving Everton. It's like, what? No, he's still a quality Premier League player who could come and fill a gap for 2 years, be part of a squad that is going to have a huge amount of games. That's going to suffer from a lack of form. It's going to suffer from injuries and suspensions, just tiredness. Like, I think sometimes, and this isn't every Newcastle United fan. This is, I know, and we can put this to football fans. I think sometimes it can be very reactionary without maybe seeing the bigger picture and just accepting that sometimes signings are going to be a little bit underwhelming. It's not always going to be the name on the back of the shirt kind of signing. It's not always going to be, 20,000 in the leaders and watching Michael Owen sign, or however many was there seeing Shearer sign that day. It's not always going to be that way. Sometimes you have to build the foundations of your house, with the less glamorous brickwork, for want of a really bad metaphor. But you get the point I'm making.
Yeah, because otherwise you can go the other way. You carry on buying those kind of players, and they just fall flat on their face. Albert Luque is one. Obviously, it went sour with Ben Arthur. Yeah, again, that just goes to show. Yes, it's a cliche, but it's true. Every transfer is a risk. But yeah, it's. I maintain this summer is absolutely crucial because next summer will either be fantastic or really, really crap.
Yeah, I might have to take a full-on month holiday just to avoid it. I mean, I hate the transfer window. But anyway,
Yeah,
let's
I'm getting
finish.
like that. It's like
Yeah,
anything though. Remember when getting a new phone was fun and getting a new car was fun if you're on but now all of a sudden it's just a hassle. And everything's pretty much the same, and it's just a massive pain in the A. The transfer window is getting like that. Just I don't know.
we're getting old, Sam. We're getting old. Right, comments
You
from
are with that
viewers and
jumper.
listeners. Honestly, mate, it's so comfy.
I am young and relevant.
You wish. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you to everyone who responded to my request for views on how Newcastle United can raise extra funds this summer, and who do you think will be sold and who would you be happy to see go. So thank you to everyone who got back in touch with me. Liam says Longstaff, Gordon, if we get 80 million, Targett, give away for a free to get rid of the wages, Pope if we sign Trafford, and Tino, if City are happy to pay up. Realistically, at some point, we need to sell one of our young first teamers to sort PSR, and that might stop us lowballing everybody. Which is what we kind of asked, what I asked you a few moments ago, Sam. But I mean, I'd rather see Gordon go than Tino Livramento. I think Tino is going to be the best right back in the Premier League. And look, if City want to come in, I said this a few weeks ago and I got laughed at, but I'm starting the bid at 120, 130 million, if I'm being honest. That's to get me talking about it, because otherwise, he's you build your team around someone like kind of Tino, because those the way teams play now with fullbacks is so important, and we've seen how good he is, and he's so young with clearly a massive future ahead of him. And Newcastle United need to be doing everything, and I'm sure they are, to scare away someone like City. Dominic says, look to sell Vlachodimos, Ashby, Lascelles, who we haven't talked about actually, but I think he will stay on for the next year. Matt Targett, Isaac Hayden, Longstaff, Willick, and Joe White. Of those, we'd only need to replace Longstaff and Willick, given we are already targeting a goalkeeper and right centre back. Someone else has said Dubravka, Vlachodimos, Targett, bring in Walker Peters on a free, which I think would be very sensible. Willick and release Wilson from the books. We've got, again, Targett, Longstaff, and Willick have to go. Ashby 2, Willick, Longstaff, Targett, Lascelles, Vlachodimos, and Dubravka.
We spoke about Vlachodimos, but there is a recurring theme there that's all pretty similar names, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much all the names we've talked about are people on this list that people have sent in. We have Phil saying Murphy's been brilliant and is such a big character, but if you could get money, say 14 million on the back of a brilliant season at 31, we should take that, replace with a younger backup to a new first choice right wing. And I guess on that point, Sam, there was a bit of criticism after Almiron's purple patch. And people said, well, why didn't Newcastle try and push him towards Exeter that summer?
Yeah.
Which I think, looking back, is a fair point to make. And could the same be applied to Jacob Murphy this summer?
No, wrong side of 30. Even though he still looks incredible, he still looks about 24 years old. But yeah, he's wrong side of 30 now. You've probably missed the window. Yeah, I was one of those that said to sell Almiron, but he stayed and still helped give us one of the best nights ever against PSG. So, and he, in fact, in both games he was phenomenal. So that is what it is. Can't dwell on the past, but I'm staggered at the amount of people that would be willing to sell Gordon. Staggered that he's such a big game player. I don't understand it whatsoever. I get his form was a bit patchy towards the end of the season. I just felt he was trying to do a bit too much on the ball. But I mean, let's not forget his goal on Boxing Day against Villa, and like I say, he's a proper big game player. You think back to that first leg semi-final at the Emirates. God, he was good. Yeah, he really turned up. Where other sort of players, especially in the final third, can go missing. He was fantastic. He is a proper big game player. So I'm staggered the amount of people that would be willing to sell him.
Yeah, me too. I think he's going to have such a huge part to play at Newcastle United next season.
And with England.
I think his ways where the season ended from has led people down this path of cash in, cash in. I just think he was I think in an ideal world you wouldn't have played him in the games he played. I think Newcastle United, given what was on the line, felt they needed that sort of player to win the games and to get them into the Champions League. In an ideal world, I think you would have given him more time to recover from the injury that he suffered and to pick up that fitness, to pick up that form. I think a lot of people expected him to really turn up. I think especially when Harvey Barnes was sort of sacrificed to fit Gordon back into the starting 11. I didn't agree with that.
No, it should have been the other way around. And, when Gordon did go on the right, he whipped in that cross for Isak against Arsenal at home in the league as well, which was just pure unadulterated filth.
But yeah, keep Anthony Gordon, I think, most certainly, unless it's a crazy, crazy bid. But there we have it. And what have we concluded? That Newcastle United have got no one that you'd happily sell for a lot of money. No one.
For lots of money, that is the key, yeah. I mean, Willick and Longstaff, one or the other, you would say, but and a goalkeeper.
Willick's
or 12.
The key there. And what you're going to get, 20 million at best for Joe Willick. The rest of them put together, you'll be lucky to get over. I mean, I think we can count Longstaff out. I think he's staying. So the rest of them,
I think he has to for the homegrown.
Yeah.
But yeah, 20 million to a Fulham, perhaps somewhere back in the capital, or a Crystal Palace if they sell Eze. Eze's got a £60 million release clause, by the way. Why aren't we going in for that?
Well,
I'll have a bit of that.
Newcastle United can answer that. But yeah, there we go. Not too many players who will bring Newcastle United much money this summer that you'd be happy to cash in on, and we are ruling out them cashing in on any of their big stars who would fetch well over £100 million each. But of course, Newcastle United are not going to do that because they're going to build their squad, their team around them in what is going to be a very exciting season filled with Champions League football. Hopefully, another run to Wembley, and who knows, maybe even a title bid. Probably not. But hey, let's be optimistic on this wonderful Tuesday morning, right?
Absolutely. The only one we haven't mentioned is Botman, by the way.
Botman?
Out of all the players of the sort of big players that are world-class potential, he would be the easiest to replace. And
Go
I'm
on.
not advocating for him to be sold because my God, I love Sven Botman. He's the best centre half I've seen play for Newcastle in my lifetime. He makes everything look so easy. But you know, when we were talking about the likes of those world class players that could fetch up to 100 million and in excess of that, Sven Botman would probably be the easiest one to replace because there is a lot of good young left-sided centre halves in and around Europe at the moment.
Well, I did not have Sven Botman on my bingo card at all.
I don't want to sell him. I'm just saying. I'm just making the point. I love Sven Botman. I hope he stays at Newcastle till the end of his career, and he is just brilliant. I'm just making the point that he would be the easiest to replace purely because there's a lot of good talent on the left side of centre back at the moment. Ignacio, Hinsapi, Lakiba. There's a lot of Hatto. There's a good number of good young left-sided centre halves around where there's not so many on the right.
Well, there we go. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on that. Sam dropping that bomb right at the end of the show. Thank you for that.
It's not a bomb. I don't want to sell it. Botman, I'd still put on all of those above all those players I just mentioned. If he stays fit, then he's one of the best centre halves around. Full stop. But I just thought I'd make the point as he was the only one we'd not mentioned.
No, fair play. Thanks, Sam, for popping on to Everything is Black and White podcast. Thanks to you guys for watching and listening. Do hit the relevant links in the podcast description box, whether it's getting your Saily eSim, whether it's getting your Cup Winners' Cup magazine, whatever you're clicking on there, it's much appreciated. I mean, Sam, we'll see you guys next week.